All right, now we're on to the next step. Now you've watched a couple videos now about squash and stretch, so hopefully you're really getting a feel for it. And remember the important features of this. You don't want to change the volume of the shape as you move it, and you don't want to kind of exaggerate it too much. You don't want it squash and stretching the whole time. You only want it some of the times. That's why we set it up first with the ball solid, because really most of the time the ball should probably be in a more round state. Okay, now really here's where your own creativity starts to come into play and your own experience. So as you start to get a feel for this, you'll start getting a better idea of how squash and stretch works. So for this first one, I don't expect it to be perfect, but I do want you making sure you're doing your best with it and you're making sure that at the peaks it's solid, okay, or it's round. All right, so moving on. So what's going to happen here is when the ball is up at the top, there it's going to be round. And again, I'm using the keyboard shortcut period and comma. You'll notice they look like a couple arrow keys if you shift on them. Okay, that's kind of that's one way you remember it goes forward and backward depending on which keys you do. But the ball up at the top here, it's not going to have any squash and stretch. It's round. And even these first couple steps. Now at 4, that's when that blur effect starts to happen. Okay, so what I can do here is go ahead and target it. And I'm going to select this free transform tool. And I'm going to zoom in, Control plus to zoom. Okay, and I'm going to take the ball and just stretch it a little bit this way. Okay, and then I'm going to squish it in a little bit that way. That might be a little too much. Let me make it more roundish. Okay, it shouldn't be going very much at first. You don't want it to go dramatically. Now, I stretched from the top and squished in from the side, but it's not angled right. To get that, you use this rotate here, and you want these points to line up. Now, one thing that's kind of helpful with this is you're turning off your snap. Okay, so you probably have snaps that turned on. It's set on by default. Okay, so if you click up here to view, you've got an option down here that says snap. And I've got several things clicked on. Yours might look a little bit different from mine, but I'm going to go ahead and click edit snapping. And I'm going to uncheck all these things and say OK. What that allows me to do is I get a little more free form. It's not what happens with snap is it tries to grab onto certain points. Okay, which can be helpful at times, but in this case I don't want it to because I want that free form. I want it to line up the way that I want it to, not lined up with anything else in particular. All right, so moving forward, okay, so here is also another helpful tip, okay, onion skin. Now, onion skin is something old school animators should use. It's basically like tracing paper. It's really thin paper, so they named it after the skin of an onion. When you peel it, you can see through it. Okay, so right down here is a button. Now, any of these tools along the bottom or anywhere on within Animate, if you mouse over it and you just let the mouse sit there, it's going to tell you what that tool is. So if you're ever wondering, okay, wait, which tool is the selection tool? Okay, you could run down your tool list here and just mouse over them one at a time, and it's going to tell you what each one is, and until eventually you get up to the selection tool. All right, but onion skin, it's down here in your timeline. It is a timeline tool. And what it does is it creates a transparency. Okay, so when I click that, I can see, actually, let me go ahead and zoom out here. And just to make this more clear, I'm going to go ahead and hide the background. Okay, so I'm going to click the little eye here next to the background and I'm going to hide that. Now, right now, the onion skin is showing 2 frames out before and 2 frames out after. Okay, that's indicated by blue and green. So everything before it is in blue, everything after is in green. If I grab this green and I stretch it on out to the end, you're going to see the entire sequence of where the ball goes. Okay, and if I stretch the blue out to the beginning, you're going to see that. So I can see that whole sequence. If I bring the background back up, you can see how it's hitting along each one of these numbers. Now, I don't need onion skin framed out that far, but I do want to bring it out a few frames in either direction. Okay, so I can see what the shape of the previous, let me zoom in again, Control plus to zoom, and the hand tool to move it around. So I can see the shape of the stretch right here. So I'm going to target the ball on this one. I still have free transform on, and I'm going to stretch this one out a little bit bigger. Okay, this one actually probably want it out the biggest because this is when it's going to be moving its fastest because it's got the most gravity moving behind it. Okay, and then I'm going to rotate it. Okay, and Control minus to zoom out. And I'm going to go ahead and use the arrow keys here on the keyboard, the period and comma keys, to see what I think about it. Okay, so I'm liking that one. 6 is also going to have a lot of squash to it. Okay, so, or a lot of stretch. Okay, so I'm going to stretch that one up that way. And it always stretches off of the middle unless you move that center point. And I don't want to do that for this. I want to keep that right there. Okay, and change the angle again. Again, I can do this to see how it looks. Okay, so it's squishing out a little bit or it's stretching out more. And then when it hits the ground, that's when squash happens. Okay, so it hits the ground and that bounce is going to happen. So pretty much want it similar to what it was. This is going to be the squishiest part because really it's moving its fastest through here. Okay, and I can click off of that to see what I think. I'm gonna leave it right there. All right. So for frame 8, bounce back up to that one, and it's still moving pretty fast. So I'm gonna have a lot of squash or a lot of stretch. Okay, and at 9 is where it starts to slow down. Okay, so this one, don't want it going quite as much. Let's bring it in some more that way. And I like being a little closer on this so that I can really see what's going on. Okay. And let's go ahead and turn that. Okay, by 10, it's doing a little less. It's almost back to round. Make sure I adjust the angle on that. 11, let's make it just a teeny bit on either way. But by 12, it's definitely round again. And at 13, it's still round. 14, we might be getting a little stretch going on. So let's just do a little bit. Angle that. Okay, and it's use your own judgment on this, really. It's not, there's no set rule on what it looks like. Just you need to keep in mind that the faster something's moving, the more stretch it's going to have. Okay, so this one, it won't be stretched out as much as it was over on 6. So I could even pull out my onion skin further so that I can see what it looks like at 6 and make sure it's not out that far. Okay, but it does need to be bigger than 15. Okay, so let's go right about there. Now we're getting a little big. All right, and it's just, again, it's an estimate. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the rest. If I hit Control Enter, I can test my movie though, and you can see how it's starting. As soon as that's done, there we go. Okay, so you can see how the squash is happening at the beginning and then it goes away. Now you want that squash and stretch happening the rest of the way because it creates a much more dramatic effect. Okay, so go ahead and finish it out for yourself, and then when you're done, you're going to submit it, and it's good to go at that point. All right. Make sure you ask if you have any questions.